Good morning. Today is Gimel Kislev, right? Today is the third day in the month of Kislev, Gimel Kislev. We learn Mamadam on Friday. And I try my best to make Mamadam understood. That's my job, yeah? My job is to teach. So the Maimer we learned Friday, which is from Tafshin Mem, it's the last Maimer of Tafshin Mem, which means we're ready to go back now, Mitzvah Hashem, to Tafshin Lametes, when we will be 40 years exactly. When the Rebbe said the Maimorim, it's an incredibly difficult Maimer. It's a beautiful Maimer. It's very, very well written. It's a Mugadika Maimer. It's edited Maimer. Very well written, very organized. But it's so edel, so sensitive, so subtle. But you know what the Maimer is about? The Maimer is about what we're learning in Tanya. It's about what we're learning in Tanya. How so? And on Friday, we had Neil. We had more women here on Friday than here right now. Could you believe it? A short Friday. One of the ladies. But they came to learn. We come and learn Chassidus. Friday it's official. We learn a Maimer. Yeah. When I teach it to you on Sunday, you can have a Tanya, but on Friday this is official. What's the Maimer about? The Maimer is about a kasha that the Rebbe raises. The Zohar says, we know the Zohar. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. We talked about it last week. And I think we talked about it 3 weeks ago also. The Zohar says a statement. Leis machshava tfisa beklal. Period. There's no machshava. There's no thought. That means no keli. There's no levush that can hold Hashem at all. Leis machshava tfisa beklal. There's no thought which can hold the Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's the Lashon of Zohar. Leis machshava tfisa beklal. On this Zohar, there are two suffixes. There are two conclusions, both found in Chassidus. One of them is in Tanya. The other one, I don't know what the Mokir is. It could be from the Rabbeim, which is fine by me. You know, I don't have a problem. The Rabbeim zijn in a Mokir. The Rebbe Talmud gesagt of an Alten Rebbe. The Rebbe was talking about something that the Alten Rebbe said, and he said that the Alten Rebbe says without a Mokir. Von wann hat der Alten Rebbe das gewusst? How the Alten Rebbe knew, das darf ich nicht wissen. How the Alter Rebbe knew, I don't have to know. The Rebbe said exactly these words. Maybe the Rebbe told him himself. But I remember the Trop, it was a long time ago, it was over 30 years ago, with Memhei. The Trop, maybe the Rebbe told him how the Alter Rebbe knew. So you have two suffixes to this Hakdama, to this prefix, which we're learning in Tanya. There's no keli, no lavush, no garment. You can hold the Eibishter. But there's two suffixes. One is avol nitvas ihu berusa deliba. Avol, taich avol, but, however, nitvas ihu, he is graspable berusa deliba. Berusa deliba means mesiris nefesh. Yechidah nefesh. Okay? What's the other suffix? The other suffix is in our Perek Dalet that we're learning now. Leis machshava tfisa beklal, there's no thought on the Eibishter. Ki'im, only. Kasha tfisa mislabeshet v'teiru mitzvah. When a Yid learns Torah and does a mitzvah, so in Torah mitzvah you hold Hashem. So the Rebbe, in this Maimer, in footnote 20, which is how we spent Friday's class, if you were here, says, wait a minute. The Zohar says there's no way to have God, yeah? Chassidus says there's two ways to have God, but there's a problem. One of the two ways says that this is the only way. What's the difference between the word avol and the word ki'im? Avol means however, and ki'im means only, exclusive. Yeah? So if I say to you, there's no way you can get this unless you do kach v'kach. Versus, there's no way you can get this, but you can get it in this way. There's a very big difference between one statement and the other. But you can get it in this way means that maybe there's another way also, and a third way. But when I say this is the only way to get it, there's no other way. So the Rebbe in this Maimer said the kasha. How could there be a Maimer from Chassidus, and I don't know the source? There's no way to have the Eibishter. Avol, but you could get him through Mesiris Nefesh, through Sudaliba, where the Tanya says, there's no way, because Baruch Hu, Ki'im, with one exception, right, as they say by the Chuppis, to the exclusion of all others. So the Rebbe's Maimer is built around this kasha. It's in a footnote, God, but the Maimer, I think, is built around this kasha. Which is it? Can you hold Hashem only through Torah mitzvahs, or can you hold Hashem also through Rusa Deliva? And the answer of the Maimer is, that the emes is, that the Tanya is right. There's only one way to have Hashem, which is what we're learning. You can only have Hashem through Torah mitzvah. But in order to get Torah mitzvah, and the Maimer is Yossi, and to have atzmus, and the Eibishter himself. And then don't ask me questions, but this is what the Maimah says. And to have atzmus, but gilu, you need to have a hakdama. In order to have atzmus and Torah mitzvahs, and to have atzmus, but gilu, you have to first have Mesidas Nefesh, and then you have to have Kabbalah Seil, and then when you do a mitzvah, it's 3 steps, not 2 steps. First Mesidas Nefesh, which is called Rusa Deliba. Then there's Kabbalah Seil, which is called Bittul. Then when you do a mitzvah, after you went through those 3 steps, you'll have the Eibishter and you'll have him Be'ezgalut. So the emes is, there's only one way to have the Eibishter, not 2. The only way to have the Eibishter is through a mitzvah. But in order to experience that you have the Eibishter and the mitzvah, you have to have first Mesidas Nefesh, which is called Ru'usa Deliba, and then Kabbalah Seil, and then you do the mitzvah. So that's how the Rebbe resolves it. He makes it fit exact. One statement said there's only one way to God. And the other statement says, well, there is a way. Because the well, there is a way is only a hakdama, it's only a prelude, it's only a means to an end, but the Eibishter himself, you can only have for Kiyum mitzvahs. This is the Maimah that we learned half of it. Or the first 4 pages, whatever we learned, we spent, it was hard. Schwer, on Friday. But it's very stark negate to us. It's very stark negate to us, because we're learning in Tanya. That the Alter Rebbe says, why does a Yid need Torah mitzvahs? A Yid is a chelik alakam imal. Mamish. A Yid is a piece of the Eibishter. A piece of the Eibishter is noch a shtickle Eibishter. Doch allein a shtickle Eibishter. He's himself a piece of the Eibishter. And the answer basically is that the neshama is a piece of Hashem, but it's concealed. And in order to reveal it, you need to have Torah and mitzvahs. And in Torah and mitzvahs, a Yid has asmas amos. In Torah and mitzvahs, a Yid has the Eibishter. Now, I just want to say a story in conjunction with what I just told you about the Maimah. We're going to learn Tanya now. Okay, the Maimah is going to be in the next hour. Today, we're going to learn Tanya, innovating. I just want to say one word, which ties into what it says in the Maimah. And I believe that this is the correct version of the story. The Rebbe Rashab had a chaver neuri, had a childhood friend. He was older than the Rebbe Nishma. I don't know how much, but it was older. Could be even 5, 6, or 7 years. So they were learning together. The Rebbe Rashab was 14, he was 21. But there was even then, Mistama Kam Kama Chabrusa. The Rebbe Nishma said, his name was Rabbi Yankiv Mordechai Bespalov. Rabbi Yankiv Mordechai Bespalov. And he was the Paltavarov. He was the Rabbi Paltavar. He was a big chassid, a very big chassid of the Rebbe Rash. And then he was a chassid of his former chaver, the Rebbe Rashab. But he was mamish a chassid of his former chaver, so he was older than him. And I told this to you many times, the famous quote in the Hayem Yem, which I had just now recently in Cheshvan, Shem shetzrichim ladas chesreines atzmi, kein tzrichim ladas mailes atzmi, just so the person has to know his faults, has to know his strengths, was a comment that the Rebbe Rashab made to him in public, after he was mavakel himself after that. The Menkev Moteh was the Rebbe Nishma Seiten Zachavrusa. So it was once a Fabrengen, it's a very famous Fabrengen, the Friedrich talks about it more than once, and he said to the Rebbe Rashab, every day the Rebbe goes higher and I go lower. And he started to cry. The Moed Shlish. He was a big Balbechi. Whenever you read Yankov Mata Paltava, sooner or later there's going to be a story where he cries uncontrollably. The Friedrich Rebbe witnessed this. He saw this. So he said this to the Rebbe Rashab, that every day the Rebbe goes higher and I go lower. By the way, we were kinder in yeshiva. And it's a Chassidim sagen das, that Rabbi Yankov Mata Yema Moshel. This Rav Yankov Mordechai Bespalov, he was the Rav in Paltava. He was a big Rav. He's a big, big Rav. He used to give a moshel. There's a bird called the Basayana. Basayana is so many different birds, I got to tell you. Anytime you want to have a bird that's angry and bitter and no good, you call him Basayana. An ostrich is a Basayana, and there's a bunch of Basayanas. Basayana is mentioned in Chumash. I think a Basayana is an ostrich. But everybody, anytime you're angry at a bird, you call him a Basayana. Yeah, Basayana. So it's a Basayana, who was a parasitic bird. We know this for a fact, that there are birds that they never make a nest. Instead, what they do is they plant their eggs in the nest of other birds. And depending on how stupid the host bird is, sometimes they just leave an extra egg. And the parents come back and they see a ibidik and no chanei. But in the birds that the parents, the hosts are smarter, they'll actually push out one of the host eggs. What happens is, when the eggs hatch, so the way birds work, if you're familiar with birds, most species, they only feed one chick. They feed the dominant chick. The birds fight. because there's not enough food to feed both, they create two, and the one that's more robust from birth basically disposes of its competition, and this is what the parents feed. That's how they operate. They don't have nachmanis, they feed the bird that's most aggressive, because the bird has to survive, and it's the way it works. So when this parasite bird plants its eggs, when the eggs hatch, the parasite is at a big advantage of the host. So frequently the parents are actually helping bring about the destruction of their own offspring, and they don't realize it. This is a part of the Eibush created this world. Yeah? It says in the Pasuk, the Eibush to make sure that an Eidev has food. And the Gemara talks about an Eidev is a raven. There's different kinds of ravens, black ravens, white ravens, don't ask. But there's a bird that's so cruel that has no Livnei Eidev Asher Yekro, has no Rachmanas on its own children. And the Eibush to make sure that the Bnei Eidev Asher Yekro, the Eibush to feeds them. Anyway, this is the Eibush as well. If you want to understand it, you might as well give me sugar from the beginning. But so this is Ad Kanagdov, is it the gay? The story was, he said that there's this host bird that lays an egg. He says that when the bird, so he says that a Basayana comes along, and he lays an egg in the nest of chickens. Now chickens have enough food, so they feed all the birds. They lay at very large clutches. So it's not like it's at the expense. I'm just trying to be nice over here. I don't want to hurt people's feelings on a Sunday morning in cold weather. But the chicken feeds all of the chicks, and then they fledge. What happens to a chicken when it fledges? It develops wings. But what does a chicken do with wings? It climbs up into a branch, 3 feet from the ground, 6 feet from the ground, as they say in English. But that's about it. I can't just flee. And chickens, we know chickens can't fly, but the Basayana can. So all the birds sit together in the nest. They're all incubated together, and then they hatch, and then they are fed. And then they fledge, they develop wings that are their adult koyach. So the chicken climbs up on a little branch and sits, and the Vasayana soars into the sky. So we were sitting on the same nest, we were incubated together. But I was the son of a Ben Adam. I remained a Ben Adam. And the Rebbe was the son of a Rebbe. So he grew up and he soared off into the sky. I remember that Melech telling us this. Vart. It's a sitting between the Vart. That the Rebbe Rashab and Hayang, the Paltiel Rav were Chaverim. Anyway, so the story is, this is all stories to a story, yeah? That the Paltiel Rav was a big, he was a Gon, he had a very great mind. He was a big chassid. He was a Meidnik Oivit. It's hard to understand what it means, people like this. Every one of us is good at one thing. They were good at everything. And they did it all by Mesiras Nefesh. A guy davened all day long, Paskan Shabbos. Could you imagine a guy davened all day long, Paskan Shabbos? This is the Lenin Allah. Guy davens all day long because a Sheikh Sidus can make a fabring and give you a piece of herring. But a person should daven bariches, and his inyan is rabbonis, niglet. This is not something we can relate to in our generation. I grew up, I didn't know who Dr. Zellickson was. We had all these jokes about Dr. Zellickson. I didn't know who he was. We didn't use Dr. Zellickson. Yeah. But I remember there was a guy, I told this to you before, in the front next to the Rebbe's place, it was always empty. 2 people stood in that place. Rabbi Chadakov and an unidentified man with his glasses like this, with the tinges of red left in his beard. We were children, we used to go in Ganid Natach. I told you this last week, the Ganid Natach was always open. This guy was standing there, davening, a whole day davening. So I said to myself, this is the Tzaddik Nistan Lubavitch. Little did I know, this was Dr. Zellickson. He started the guy like the devil. And this is Mtzias. This is what I observed in I didn't know who he was. And every time we used to go with the Ganed Natach and we played in there. The 770 was not locked. All the doors were open except for the Rebbe's Cheder. And he was ganze Tag standing gedammt. We had so many good Dr. Zellickson jokes, I just never saw the guy. He would stand there. He's a Chassidish Yid, a doctor. No, das is a Oisnam. Yeah, if you're a doctor, you're not a Chassidish Yid. If you're a Chassidish Yid, you're not a doctor. If you're Mashpiyah, you can't learn. If you're a Rav, you're not a Marash Yeshiva. It wasn't that way. A Yid was a Rav with Paskin Charles in a big city, in a Greisish Stadt. Yeah, and in Yidam long. And you know, the Rebbe's father's predecessor in the Yekatinas of a gate in the Beravov, the Beravov was a Rav in a big city. Yekatinas was a very big city. It had tens of thousands of Jews. He used to say, it's good to start late because you have a choiv. The Friedrich Rebbe says, as Beravov given in Lubavitch, is a Tzulich bench and a Chalz given in Tzom. The Friedrich Rebbe says, now don't try that at home. I mean, he went a Chassidish Sharia, he didn't sleep till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then have bezenis and coffee barichis, and then knocked off a daven. He davened, but he was a Rav. He passed in shyness. You understand? You had to deal with domestic things. This is something which is very rare. I don't know who was the last person we saw like this. Maybe the Shmuel. I never saw such a person. I never saw a person whose occupation is one thing, and then there's something completely different. There's a ganz eingetan. You don't see that. But Amol Latzach see the word. Anyway, the Paltiel didn't live that long. He passed away relatively young. I don't know how old he was, but he passed away before the Rebbe Rashab. When he was on his deathbed, let's say he was in his early 60s, let's say. So he said, I know that tomorrow morning I will not put on film. I will not put on film. The Pasha's not going to make it. And I know why. Because I haven't slept in a bed in 40 years. And gepeinig dem guf. You know what it means that sleep in a bed? He slept in a chair. He didn't sleep in a bed, he was a serious Ayvid Elikim. Again, the honest truth is, we can't find the five. You know, the Tmimim, the Lubavitch, the Bacham, who the Lubavitch. There are people like Rabbi Mayor, who we saw. They had a shtickle verstand in this kind of idea. Nicht to get schlafen in a bed. But he says, I know that I'm not going to say Kishma tomorrow morning because I haven't slept in a bed in 40 years. And I would give away 40 years of skafia to put film on one more time. This is the word. I would give away 40 years of skafia to put on film one more time. Could you imagine? I would give away 40 years of skafia, 40 years of serving Hashem to do one more mitzvah. This comment got back to the Rebbe Rashab in Lubavitch. This comment got back to the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe Rashab, you remember, he made Tem Chutbim. Tem Chutbim was all about Avodah. The Rebbe Rashab was Gemara. The Rebbe Rashab wanted the Bacham to live on this level of Mesiras Nefesh. So the Rebbe Rashab said, when the Vort was publicized, Gerecht is it, he's right. That you give away 40 years of Iskafiyat, put on one more time. But it takes 40 years of Iskafiyat to have that chush. How much does a person have to value a mitzvah, one mitzvah? To say, I'll give away my whole life's work for one more mitzvah. The Rebbe said it takes a life full of work to have that chush. That's what the Mayamis says. That anytime you do a mitzvah, but before you do the mitzvah, you have Mesiras Nefesh, of Rusa de Liba. And then you have the Kabbalah sale, which the Maimon develops. So that in the mitzvah you have the Eibishter Begoli. You have a sense of what a mitzvah is. You have a sense of what a mitzvah is. This is one of those Hashgacha Pratas. We're learning Tanya on Sundays, and the second hour today we're going to be learning also, we're going to be continuing this Maimon. And the Maimon is mamish exactly the inyan that we're learning in Tanya. Now let's see if we can actually learn some Tanya inside. If you don't mind opening up your Svarim. We're near the end of Peirik Dal. And if you liked what I said about the Maimon, you're welcome to stick around for the second hour and actually learn with us. We're on page 16. Actually, no. We're on Tes Amud Aleph. We're on page 17, second line from the top of the page. We're near the end of Peirik Dalet. It's Tes Amud Aleph. Tes Amud Aleph, okay? It's near the end of Peirik Dalet. Again, the discussion of the table is why a Yid needs Yiddishkeit. Why does a Jew need Judaism? And the answer is a Jew needs Judaism because in Judaism he reveals his connection to Hashem. True, a Yid has a connection to Hashem. Fakat, a Yid is a chelik alakam imal. Mamish. A Yid is a piece of the Eibishter, but it's dormant, it's hidden, it's latent, it's concealed, it's covered over. To help a Yid find out what a Yid is, Yid needs Yiddishkeit. And he quoted the Zayah. This is, like I said, a broken record. I say this every single Sunday. He quoted the Zayah. That the Zayah says that Tate and Hashem are one. Now, as far as we're concerned, that means where means chapter 4. We're going to be going into Peirik Hesed. We're going to soon move on from 4 to 5. And in Peirik Hey, the Rebbe is going to make a difference between Torah and mitzvahs. In Peirik 5, chapter 5, that was going to make a difference between Torah and mitzvahs. But in our Peirik Dalet, what we're holding right now, Torah and mitzvahs are a unity. They're the same idea. Anytime you do any mitzvah, anytime you learn any word or thought of Torah, even Ois Achas, if you learn the way you're supposed to, you're Teifes Atzvas Amus. You have Hashem Himself. So the Rebbe says, V'lochein, and therefore, Amru, it says in the Mishnah, and of course there's so many Maimorich Chassidus, on this Mishnah. In Gutei Eid, you have it in Pashas Neach, and in other places. There's a lot of Maimorich Chassidus that are based on this Mishnah. Yafa Sho Achas. It is beautiful, more pretty, more beautiful. 1 hour. B'tshuvo Ma'asim Tevim, in tshuva with good deeds. And of course the way Chassidus explains it, when you do good deeds as tshuva. What does that mean, you're doing good deeds as tshuva? You're doing good deeds so that the neshama should return to Hashem. V'aruach toshav elo'alekim Hashem nisana. Tshuva doesn't have to mean Avedas. Tshuva has to mean to return the neshama el cheika via kinyoreha, that the neshama should be one with Hashem like it was before when you read this lamata. It's going to be discussed in Perek Lamed Aleph, chapter 31 in Tanya, which will happen sometime in this century. Sometime in okay, before tough, we'll get to Perek Lamed Aleph. Yeah? So it's like tshuva ma'asim tevim. They're doing good deeds as an act of tshuva to come back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Mishnah says 1 hour, insha, 1 hour of tshuva ma'asim tevim in this world is worth more mikol chayei ha'olam haba, than the entire life of the world to come. Now there's more words in the Mishnah. What steht noch? Yafa cha achaf be'olam haba mikol chayei ha'olam hazeh. If you could take God's Olam Hazeh, the whole Olam Hazeh, every pleasure and every delight and every comfort and over all of time and over all of space, and crunch it into an hour. Gan Eden is more valuable. This is amazing. An hour of Torah and mitzvahs in this world is worth more than Gan Eden, when all the pleasures of this world don't add up to an hour of Gan Eden. So you have here a double kal v'chein, a kol shekain, and another kol shekain. How incredible is Gan Eden? You know how incredible Gan Eden is? That if you could find a way of crunching together all of the pleasures of this world, and all of time, and all of space, the pleasures of all of time and all of space, into an hour, Gan Eden is more than that. No? And then you say 1 hour of doing mitzvahs in Elam Hazeh is worth more than the whole Gan Eden. So the Gans Gan Eden is more than, Gans Elam Hazeh is less than an hour of Elam Haba. And Gans Elam Haba is less than an hour of mitzvahs in this same Elam Hazeh. Yeah, I always tell you the word. They say it in the name of Rabbi the Masmid, that the two neshamas met. I forgot from whom I heard this. Two neshamas met. One was coming and one was going. One was coming from Gan Eden to Elam Hazeh, and the other is going from Elam Hazeh back to Gan Eden. So the neshama that's going says to the neshama that's coming, "No, give me an idea what you've done. What's Herzchen Elam Hazeh? What am I getting myself into?" As if he had a choice. Chachafilu steht in Hayem Yem, wartet 1000 Jahre, Abkommen of der Welt, Atana Teva Yidin. Yeah, but then it also says, Bal Korcha Chatachai. Bal Korcha Chatachai. So the neshama that's coming says to the neshama that's going, "See, tell me somebody that might say, oh, for 10 cents you can buy a tzitz. For 10 kopeks you can buy a tzitz. A mitzvah. For 10 cents you can buy, you think about it, for 10 cents you can buy a mitzvah." So the neshama that's going, sounds like Candyland. It sounds like Disneyland with free admission. For 10 cents you can buy a tzitzit. Tzitzit is supposed to be Baruch Hu, yeah? So the neshama that's going says, but to get those 10 cents you have to give your neshama away. That the neshama reiski. That's Elam Hazeh. Right? Ikir and Tafel Elam Hazeh. What's important and what's unimportant in Elam Hazeh? We were children. I remember I had him along with Rabbi Engel. So sein gesund, Rabbi Sol Engel. So sein gesund stark. He was a very Chassidish Malamed. He was made in the Hartzik. He used to kiss the students. He used to kiss them. Today they would fire him. But he was a Emes Chassidish Malamed. He used to put into us so much Yiddish Shamayim. But I not everybody liked him, by the way. But everybody got from him. Because he gave his neshama to all of us. He really did. So sein gesund. Anyway, so he had his stories. He would tell myself. He tells a lot of the stories from the Gemara. Then Yankiv, I know stories I heard from him. I still remember them. So one of his stories that he would tell very dramatically, he was a very dramatic man. He's still a dramatic man. Was the story about the chicken fat. He told it about potatoes because we didn't know what chicken fat was. That there's a person who lives in a land where there's rich people and then there's poor people, and they hear that there's a faraway land where gold is rolling in the streets. Gold is rolling in the streets, like over here, pebbles. So Chaverman decides, I'm going to get on a boat, I'm going to travel to that land, and I'm going to pick up gold, and I'll be a Oishet, I'll come back here, richest man in the country. So he makes a journey, he gets on a ship, he gets a captain, a crew to take him to this foreign land. He comes to this foreign land, and he comes out, there's gold rolling in the streets. So he starts collecting gold, he's putting it in his pockets. Anyway, he walks into a store, and he puts down a nugget of gold and says, give me breakfast. He says, this is nothing, this is garbage in a stone. He says, so how am I going to pay you for breakfast? Oh, breakfast is 3 potatoes. Potatoes, 3 potatoes. Oh, how do you get potatoes? So he goes outside, potatoes, no price of potatoes. He'll work 10 hours to get 3 potatoes. So he found out that this is another system. Over here, gold is worthless, but potatoes. So anyway, he came here to pick up gold. And he remembers that he doesn't have money for his return trip. So now he realizes that he has to store his gold, but he has to collect enough potatoes to be able to buy a return ticket to bring the gold back to the land from which he came, so he should be wealthy. Of course, you understand what happens. By the time he collects enough potatoes to go back, he forgot that the thing of value is gold. And he comes back home with that boatload full of potatoes. Full. He rolls, look how rich I am! Potatoes! First potatoes, then potatoes. Must have been the gold. And he finds Rabbi Engel was a nice man. He didn't want us to walk away broken-hearted. In one of the boxes of potatoes have a few pieces of gold, and he was able to live. And he could tell that story for an hour. And when he finishes, he says, and the Neshama goes from Gan Eden into Elam Hazeh. And they tell him that in Elam Hazeh you can get gold. And then he comes to Elam Hazeh, and he realizes in Elam Hazeh the only thing of value is potatoes. It's such a correct mush. It's a disturbing mush. But it's a correct mush. Potato means this is gold. But how? What's gold? It's potatoes. It's potatoes and gold. Gold is potatoes. So you come into this world and you forget what's Ika. A Rebbe doesn't have these problems. A Rebbe's problems, he doesn't understand that we have a problem. A Rebbe is halakus bepshitas. Not his halakus bepshitas. His first perspective is Abish. That says the only thing that matters are mitzvah. What about potatoes? No, mele potatoes. With the potatoes. But we're so busy with the potatoes. We forget about the gold. We all know that, like it says in the Mishnah Pegiyavis, Elam Hazeh Deimel Pruzder. Hachnes Atzmachal Pruzder. Elam Hazeh is a Pruzder. A Pruzder means a hallway. And the Pruzder brings you into the Trakrin. Elam Haba is the Trakrin, the palace. But you have to go through the Pruzder, through the hallway the way you're supposed to, like the Maggid said in the Rehem Adesh. But you get so caught up in the Pruzder, you start collecting potatoes instead of gold. And then when you come back to the palace, they say you have a bunch of rotten potatoes, they're going to spoil them, we don't need them, we need gold, and you have no gold, you have very little gold. Alright, I'm not about Musa, I didn't come here to make people feel bad. For that I have myself. I'm very good at it. I'm very good at giving the Musa, and also very good at feeling disgusting with myself. I'm very good for my design. But the Toichan Adover is the Ilmazi of mitzvahs. Mitzvahs is not so much. So the Mishnah says, Yofa Shah Achas, 1 hour of Tshuva Ma'aseh Tov. That means doing mitzvahs in the inyan of reconnecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is more than Gantz Elam Haba. Gantz Elam Haba. Elam Haba is not potatoes. Elam Haba, as you'll see in a moment, and we're going to talk about it, is Tainuga Asoga. Elam Haba, which means Gan Eden in this case, is a place where you experience the delight of godliness. You experience the pleasure from Ein Seif. And the pleasure from Ein Seif is Kishmoi Keidu, is Ein Seif. It's Ein Seif. And a mitzvah is more valuable than the Gantz Elam Haba. Why? Because in Elam Haba you experience the pleasure from Ein Seif, and in this world you have Hashem Himself. In the Lashon HaKabbalah, Hashem is not Ein Seif. Hashem is Ein Tchila, you understand? And there's a very big difference between Ein Seif. Ein Seif means has no end. Ein Tchila means has no beginning. So it says in the Meripanu that Kol Dava Sheshlei Kol Dava Sheshlei Tichla Yeshlei Tchila. Whatever has an end has a beginning. V'lei Kol Dava Yeshlei Tchila Yeshlei Tichla. But not everything that has a beginning has an end. Some things have a beginning, but they don't have an end. We call them Ein Seif. But Kol She'ein Lei Tchila, Ein Lei Tichla. If it has no beginning, it for sure has no end. Those are 3 different pisgah. If you have an end, you have a beginning. If you have a beginning, it's possible that you shouldn't have an end. But if you don't have a beginning, you for sure don't end. The Eibishter is called Ein Tchila, there's no beginning. And the Eibishter Linis, Getlichkeit, Godliness is called Ein Leisef. Ein Leisef. It has no end. Ein Leisef. It has no end. No, saying Gan Eden you have Ein Leisef. And in the mitzvah you have Ein Tchila. In the mitzvah is Tfisa, the Eibishter himself. So the Mishnah says that Yid comes into this world for 1 hour and collects tzitzis, collects a few nuggets of gold before he starts distracting himself with the potatoes. It's more than Gan Selam Haba. Why? Because it's the Eibishter himself. Yeah, let's read it inside. That's what the Mishnah says. Yofa Shah Achas, it is prettier, more beautiful, more valuable. 1 hour. B'tshuva, ma'asem tovim, with tshuva and good deeds, be'elam hazeh, in this world. Mikol chai elam haba. From all of elam haba. Now, what is elam haba? In case you don't know, it's a Yofa Shah Achas Okedes Roch be'elam haba. Mikol chai elam hazeh. Elam haba is infinite. Elam haba is infinite. And one mitzvah is more than the infinity of elam haba. Which is fantastic. It says a double kal v'chein. Why? Because in Tanya it says, and like I said to you before, from Vater der Alte Rebbe gewusst, das darf nicht wissen. Efter hat der Atmos muss allein gewusst. The Rebbe said this once by a Fabrengen in Tashin Nemei in the winter time. The Alte Rebbe says that in a mitzvah you don't have a connection to the Eibishter, you have the Eibishter himself. Ki, how does he explain it? What's the Higoyin Shabbat? What's the philosophy? Elam Haba. The world to come, which means Gan Eden, is Ne'anin Miziv HaShechina. You have pleasure of what's called the ray of the Shechina. You don't have the Shechina itself. You have what's called Ziv HaShechina, the light of the Shechina, the ray of the Shechina, the reflection of the Shechina. And the reflection of the Shechina is less than the Shechina itself, less than the Eibishter himself. And how do you have this ray of the Shechina? Shahu, that this is Tainu HaSagir. It's the delight and the pleasure that the neshama gets in Gan Eden from having a hasaga, that means having an understanding in Elokus. So the Rebbe says, if you understand Elokus, and because you understand Elokus, you delight in Elokus, you have pleasure from Elokus. So the understanding of Elokus is not Elokus. Understand, right? You're a smart guy, you understand God. If you understand the Eibishter, you don't have him, you have this understanding. But if you have pleasure from that understanding, in that pleasure, there is a lakus, there's the Eibishter. In the understanding itself, it's only a seich, nachoch. But the Tainoga Saga, the light that's above the understanding, this is take lakus. He says, but and nobody can understand everything. Nobody, you can't understand the whole Eibishter. And if you can't understand the whole Eibishter, you can't experience the pleasure of the whole Eibishter. Ki im only eze ha'ara me'er Hashem. All you can experience is a little bit of light from the Eibishter, and no more. V'lachei nikra, which is why we call it b'shem ziv, a ray, hashchina of the Shechina. So in Gan Eden is a world of brains, of intelligence, of hasaga. There's a concept which is called Tainoga Hasaga, the pleasure from that understanding. The pleasure from that understanding is not understanding, that's the Eibishter himself. But you see, the amount of Eibishter himself that you have is a reflection of how much you can understand. You can't understand everything. Not everything is understandable. We said before, you're no moyach, not only a moyach hagashmi, but a moyach haruchni, a moyach hanivdol. You can't understand Hashem. You understand a little bit, a little more than a little bit, but it's only a little bit. Safe, call safe, it's only a little bit. No? So if you understand the Eibishter and you have pleasure in that understanding, the Eibishter it isn't. Yeah? Aber HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chveide v'yatzmei, the Eibishter himself, leis machshava tfisa be'klal, you cannot understand the Eibishter. So b'meila, if you can't understand the Eibishter, you can't delight from the Eibishter. You can only delight from this of Hashem that you're able to understand. Ki'im, but there's an exception. There's one exception. What is the exception? Kasha tfisa u'mislabeshes. When it holds and it's revealed, b'teiro mitzvah, in learning Torah, doing a mitzvah, right? In the mashal from a bitch of the masmid, atzitzeh, yeah, a piece of gold in a land where potatoes are worshipped. Azai hitvisa behen umislabeshes. There's different gizes of it. Yeah, tvisa mislabeshes. You are holding, and it's revealed to you the Eibishter himself. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mamish, the Eibishter himself. The Erais of HaKadosh, he says again. Torah and Hashem are one. And I'm saying again, that in this Perek Daled, whenever it says Torah, it means Torah and mitzvahs. The idea that there's somehow a difference between the mitzvahs, we don't know yet. So far, when he brings the Zayah, the Raisa v'kutshabricha kula chad heir neshama one, he means side teir and side mitzvahs. Now, I want to share something with you.
So, the intellectually understanding the mitzvah of the Torah, but that pleasure, you get like a person has like a good sense. They feel good about it. That's what you were referring to before?
No, I was referring to doing the mitzvah.
What's
To doing the mitzvah. But Hashem isn't doing the mitzvah, not enjoying the mitzvah. Doing the mitzvah.
And when we're doing it, that good sense we get of like, we just feel like a certain enlightenment, connection, whatever it is. That's what, that's separate from, that's the work that's separate from the...
I can't explain it better. I can't get message verstehen. Hashem is not in our pleasure. Hashem is in what we do, not in our pleasure. And the reason he's in our pleasure is precisely because because you're doing what he wants, not what you want. I can't get message verstehen. I can't explain it better.
So you feel a certain sense of...
Okay, I want to say two things. The first thing I want to say is Chassidische Teich. It's a very Yossi Teich. It's very important, and I have to say it. It's not negated to the Tanya, but it has to be said. Yeah. According to Mishnah, yeah. What does the Mishnah say? Yafa shoa achas b'tshuvu ma'asim tevim be'elam hazeh mikol chay ha'elam haba. It's better 1 hour of tshuva and good deeds in this world than all of the life of the world to come. So it's a Hasidic Taich, which you know, you've heard it before. Yofa shoa achas ein ker, a ker tonzer in Yiddish. First of all, in Hebrew, the word shoa means an hour. But as you know, and I talk about this an awful lot, that in Lashon HaKodesh, in the old languages, in Hebrew, you don't have a lot of words. There's very few words. But every word has many types, many different aspects. The word she'eh, right? The Seyad Hashem Elokeinu, uvelis filasam she'eh. The word she'eh is exactly the same word as the word sha'ah. It means to turn. When Cain and Hevel brought karbanos in the Chumash, it says the Eibishter turned to Hevel and his karban, del Cain. Same knowledge, same word, same vowels. Shah is the verb of turning. So Shah means an hour, and Shah means a turn. Right? By Yosha Adeshem. As Yisrael, there's different ways of translating by Yosha. Before Oz Yosha, Yosha told me I'm so there's different types. One of the Yosha ways he turns. There's other ways to translate the word Yeshua, which means salvation, which is also the same Shadish. Shin Ayin Hey. When you But the Tzemach says, Chassidus says a lot. They'll take a Hebrew word, they'll show you how many different translations it has, and they'll show you the achtos in them, and you'll develop such a yoifi, it's incredible. So Chassidim Taichen, Yofa Shoah Achas, B'tshuvu Ma'asim Tevim, and it's better 1 hour. Aker Tanzach. All a Yid has to do is turn. You turn in a different direction, and it's a whole nother life. 1 moment, because Chaker, doesn't even an hour. You turn in another direction. And of course, the story that we know that's associated with this is the Sipar HaYadua. You have this Kiponu Alei Edev Alei Ponim. The Rabbi used to speak about this a lot. The Rebbe Ayat Safidika was a child. He was a Chayim. And they were doing Ramont in Lubavitch. They were doing building in Lubavitch. Doing building in Lubavitch would be like a Martian landing in New York City. They never did building in Lubavitch. The Lubavitch was so primitive. It was a special... In other words, it wasn't like today. You see buildings going up all over the place. It never happened. So the Friedrich was sitting in Cheder, and he looked out the window at the building that was taking place, wherever it was. And as the Eibishter would arrange in his world of Ashkocha Pratis, who saw him looking out the window? His father. The Rebbe Nishmasein. The Rebbe Rashab was his father, and the Rebbe Rashab was his Mechanech, the Rebbe Rashab was his Madrech, and the Rebbe Rashab was to be the son of a Rebbe, you better be a Rebbe or you'll plot. It's not so easy to have a Rebbe for a father. They were very close, very, very close. But the Rebbe Rashab was unbelievably strict. The Rebbe used to tell the Rebbe Rashab that she should ease up on the child And the Rebbe Rashab would answer her, what kind of child do you want? It's a sipurim. Anyway, the Rebbe saw the Rebbe looking out the window. Of course, he didn't say anything just nice. He wasn't going to embarrass him. But when he came home from Cheder, he called him. And he told him the famous quote, we all know it. It's better to besser sein in Dreusen. Gucken inwendig, innewenig, wir sein innewenig, gucken in Dreusen. It's better to be outside than look in than be inside and look out. Why? Because direction is sometimes more important than location. Where you're headed is sometimes more important than where you are. If two people are looking for each other and they're 6 feet away, but they're going in opposite directions. If two people are a mile apart, but they're going towards one another. If I take the pasuk, Kipano elai eiref elai, you're looking for the Eivish, but you have your back turned. So Shah means a ketan. Shah means an hour, but it also means the direction. When a person reestablishes his direction, where what's most important in his life is tshuva, ma'asim tevim, that's more important than gan sein lamabo. This is a chassidish avart which you have to put in your heart. Yeah. But now I want to share something else with you, which is, it's not important, but it's an Indian, it's pshat in the Tanya, and I want to share it with you because I think it opens up the Tanya a little bit. And that is like this. It's impossible for us to understand this completely. Because we have a goof, we have a body. And we live in time and space, physical time and space. And our entire conditioning, in other words, the way our brain works, is it's conditioned to work through the limitations of time and space. We can't think outside of it. But it's written in Torah, and of course it's discussed at length in the Rambam, that there are creations that are called nivdolim. Naman beis dalad lamed yud mem. The Sherish word is beis dalad lamed, separate, nivdolim. Nivdolim means creations that Hashem made, that at least in the opinion of the Rambam, that have absolutely no goof. There's no body whatsoever. If they have no body, they don't have the concept of time and space. If they have no body of any type, they have no type of time and space. If they have a spiritual body, they have a spiritual concept of time and space. This is a machlokes Rambam and Ramban. It's brought to Chassidus. The Rambam holds that a malach has no body whatsoever. If a malach has no body whatsoever, then he has no concept of time and space. And yet we speak about the levels of malachim, and many malachim, and so on and so forth. And the Rambam asks the question, I don't understand. If a malach is a nivdal, that means he has no body at all. Not he has a spiritual body, like the Ramban says. There's no goof at all. He's pure Havdalah, separateness. So he has no time, he has no space. No. So what is he? And how is there more than one of him? So the Rambam explains that there's a concept called Seichel Nivdal. Seichel Nivdal means ideas that are removed from material, removed from matter, removed from time and space. We have no concept of what that means. It doesn't mean that you're understanding things more abstract. You're understanding things without a form, without an association to a reality. There's no tables and chairs on a gashmitzvah. There's no tables and chairs of any type. To understand that there's a concept of ideas that are pure seichel, pure ideas, not juxtaposed on anything, is literally impossible. In other words, you can use your imagination to try and imagine what you call mokum uzman ruchni, a spiritual concept of time and space. But no time and space, it's unimaginable. And the idea that there's seichel, that there's intellect, that there's understanding, no time and space, is very difficult to comprehend. It's very, very hard to understand. It's impossible to understand. But the Rambam says it's real. And that seichel is the source of our seichel. We have it backwards. We understand things through a body. We understand things in the framework of time and space, which means our ability to understand is so encumbered. It's so limited. It's so heavy. And it's a shufra the shufra. It's a me'ain the me'ain. It's a hara the hara. It's a teeny tiny little fraction of what the Neshamas of Malachim understands that are called Nivdom, that have no goof whatsoever. Their level of understanding is a total abstraction. And if you want to use a muscle to understand this, understand that the Eibush is also smart. Yeah? The Eibush is smarter than the Malachim. What kind of smarts does the Eibush have? What kind of intelligence does Hashem have? There's no, in the Eibish's world, there's nothing at all. There's no Metzias whatsoever. And we all understand that if the Eibush gave us Chochmah, right, Aneta Eiz and Halei Yishma, If the Eibishter gave you an ear that he could hear, if the Eibishter gave you an eye, he could see. If the Eibishter gave you intelligence, he has intelligence as well. So it's a different concept, a totally different concept. And the word that's used in Hebrew to denote it is havdalah, which basically means don't even try. It's a completely different concept from something altogether. Legamri. It's a ganz andere Sache. Because if you have to understand, you have to have a context. To understand without a context, we can't relate to. But that's what Malachim are busy. And the Rambam says the same is true of an Neshama. A Neshama is like a Malach. Right? The Rambam doesn't have a separation between Neshamas and Malachim like you have in Kabbalah. The Rambam doesn't make those distinctions. Forget, in the world of the Rambam, you get the impression that Malachim are higher than Neshamas. In Kabbalah, Neshamas are higher than Malachim. And I'm not going into this, it's not our business at all. But a Neshama is the same thing. A Neshama is a Seichel Nivda. A Neshama existed before the Eibishter created the world, like a Malach. A Neshama is going to exist after the Eibishter destroys the world, after the Nachat Charuv. And the Neshama is a Nivda, like a Malach. The only difference is that the Neshama comes into a goof. And when he comes into a goof, the Neshama is given a choice. He can bring himself to the Yem Shekulei Tev, the Elam Shekulei Tev, and the Yem Shekulei Arach, Telam Haba, or Rahman al-Etzlan, he can bring himself to Kodesh. Malachim don't get that choice. They don't come into this world, so they don't have the opportunity to earn Elam Haba, but they also don't have the opportunity to Rahman al-Etzlan to bring about Kodesh. But basically is a bad word, but the Neshama and the Malach in the Rambam's way of thinking is the same thing. In other words, dogs have souls. Dogs have souls. Fish have souls. Gefilte fish is a machlokes, yeah? Fish have souls. Insects have souls. Do plants have souls? It's a fregen harav. But everything that exists has a nefesh. What happens to the neshama of a dog when the dog dies? The answer is when the goof of the dog dies, the neshama of the dog dies as well. You know why? Because a dog is a dog, you understand? A dog is a davar gashmi. It's a physical thing. Nothing physical can exist without a nefesh. But the nefesh is the meshamish of the goof. The soul serves the body. When the body dies, the soul dies as well. A human being has such a nefesh also. A human being also has such a nefesh that when the goof dies, the neshama dies. But the human being has a second nefesh. This second nefesh is like a malach. It existed before the person was created. And it's going to continue to exist after the person gesund, da klare Koppen, a voller Herzrate, und nicht kein Peirisch Jahren, zu alle gute Sachen, ja? Auf uns alle, mit der Kol, Klal Yisrael. But that Neshama that comes before the goof, and that Neshama that's going to survive after the goof, is not goof bound. It's not defined by the body, so when the body dies, it doesn't die, it goes on. It's called a Nivdal. This Hasaga, this kind of intellect, is incredibly abstract and incredibly rich. In other words, the Neshamas in Gan Eden are not a little smarter than us. They're not a lot smarter than us. They're so much smarter than us that if we would meet, we would call them stupid. We would have no clue what they're talking about. Why? They probably don't even use words. They're nivda. Okay, this is in the Rambam. This what I just told you, Ad Khan is in the Rambam. What does it say in Chassidus from Kabbalah? And I think you have to figure out how to understand this in Rambam, but we're not doing comparative Rambam and Kabbalah. That every neshama lives in Gan Eden before it comes into this world. Every neshama, after it was in this world, and it leaves this world, it goes back to Gan Eden. But there's a huge difference between what the neshama had before it came into this world and after it returns to Gan Eden. What's the difference? A neshama that was not in this world is very, very, very intelligent, incredibly smart. And its intelligence is called Havdalah. Nivda. No goof. We cannot imagine. How could you have ideas without a reality? If there's no things, what are you studying? You understand? The idea of logic without material, it precludes us. It doesn't make any sense. You're understanding a rock. You're understanding water. There's no rock, there's no water. What are you understanding? And then to come along and say, by the way, understanding a rock, understanding water is garnished. Because you're understanding through a thing. You understand pure understanding. We don't know how to eat it. But this is what the Rambam holds. This is Amitas Advar. This is Teiras Emes. It's from the Eibishter. Kvayachol. That Malachim and Neshamis are called Sichli and Nivdalim. That means they understand without any reality. So they're not concerning themselves with rocks, you understand. They're concerning themselves with what's real. What's real? The Eibishter. So the Neshamis and Malachim, the Rambam writes, if Malachim have no guf, how would you say higher Malachim and lower Malachim? And the answer is the difference between one Malach and another Malach is how much you understand. The Rambam says there's 10 levels of Malachim. Lower Malachim understand less, higher Malachim understand more. But the difference between one and the other is not in their guf. There is no guf. So l'chayre b'pashtus, without the kashas, there's no zman and mokim. The Chassidus says different than the Rambam, but this is the much more according to the Rambam. The whole difference between one malach and another malach, and one neshama, another neshama is how much it understands. So the Kabbalah now is added here. Every neshama in Ganei understands the Eibishter in a way that in 1,000 years and 1,000,000 years will never understand. But all the neshama has is what's called the Chassidus Hasaga. It understands. Hasaga means they're talking about Hashem. They may be talking about Hashem in the most high and most profound levels, but all they have is the discussion of that is Hashem, that Hashem is, and what Hashem is. But Hashem himself, they cannot have. They can't have it. Then the neshama comes into this world. And between all the potatoes that are collected, pick up a few nuggets of gold. Yeah, we call them mitzvahs, tzitzis. And when the neshama goes back to Gan Eden, we'll talk about this later, Barichas and Pedikei, mitzvah at the end. The mitzvahs themselves, they don't have access to. The mitzvah itself, they don't have access. But every mitzvah has what's called a levush, a garment, a beged. The neshama comes back to Gan Eden with these levushim, these beged, these begod, these shirts, these reflectors. Before it was here, we didn't have any of these shirts. It was just a neshama. Now the neshama goes back with these shirts. These shirts are the levushim of the mitzvahs that it didn't Elam Hazim. When the neshama goes back to Gan Eden after being in this world, because it has these levushim, which it didn't have before, there's a new dimension to its experience. The neshama understands Alakus, and through the understanding of Alakus, it feels the pleasure of Alakus. This second idea that the neshama not only understands, but from the understanding, experiences the pleasure of Alakus, is in effect, is de facto experiencing Alakus. It's experiencing Ein. Because the only way to know what the Alakus is to experience Alakus itself. So before you come here, you can be the smartest guy. All you have is a Hasaga. When you go back, in addition to the Hasaga, you have what's called Tainug Hasaga. The pleasure from that understanding. This you didn't have here. You didn't have it here. It's impossible to have it here. We see, but there is a containment. There's a limitation. The neshama was, before it was here, had understood the Lakus. Comes into this world, does mitzvahs, collects a bunch of shirts, yeah, goes back Lamaila, and again does the same thing than before. It's understanding the Lakus. But now, because of the levushim, in addition to understanding the Lakus, they have the pleasure from that understanding. So the Rebbe says, don't you see? The neshama comes back after being here, so it's called Elam Haba, the world to come after Elam Haza. You have Elam Haba, yeah, the pleasure. Because you did Tainug mitzvahs, you took these levushim with you back to Gan Eden. So you're experiencing Tainug Elaki, but the Tainug that you're experiencing in Elakus cannot be more than your Hasaga. Because the whole pleasure is based on your understanding, understand? Or to say it in different language, when you have a kavanah in a mitzvah. Kavanah in a mitzvah. A kavanah has two parts. The first part of kavanah is what the mitzvah means. The second part of the kavanah is that when you do a mitzvah that has a meaning, it gives you pleasure, which is what you were describing before exactly. The understanding of what the mitzvah means you could have before you came here. The pleasure of that understanding you can only have when you did it. But the pleasure is connected to the understanding. So if the understanding is limited, the pleasure is also limited. So the Rabbi says, don't you understand that as long as a creature is relating to the Eibishter, through the medium of understanding, its ability to experience the Eibishter himself is limited by that understanding. And the truth of Hashem is not a little more than he understands or she understands. It's not a lot more than he or she understands. It's at a whole different level. That's why the Mishnah says, let's read it one more time inside, yeah? So the Mishnah says, Yafa Shor Achas. It is preferred, it's more beautiful, 1 hour. B'tshuva, ma'asim tovim, that when you're down here in this world, actually doing the tshuva. And actually doing the mitzvahs is more mikol chayil than all the pleasure in Elam Haba, which means Gan Eden. Why? Ki Elam Haba, Gan Eden is shenenin miziv hashchina. You have pleasure from from the ray of the Shekhinah. The emphasis on the word pleasure. I don't have time to give you a language drasha, so I won't give you a language drasha. But in Chassidus, tainug, experiencing delight, experiencing pleasure, is tantamount, is the same thing as experiencing Elokus, the Eibishter himself. But if you could experience Elokus as a human pleasure, it's not the whole Eibishter, it's just what you're able to feel and experience. And the truth is much, much more, infinitely more. Okay? Ki, Elam haba, Ushanan miziv Elam haba gan Eden, is you experiencing a pleasure from the rays of the Shekhinah. What are the next three words? Shehu, Tainug, Hasaga. You see? That's the pleasure from understanding. You got two things here. The first is called Hasaga. The second is Tainug Hasaga. Before Neshama comes into this world, the Hasaga, there's no Tainug. There's no insane. When Neshama goes back, it has Tainug Hasaga. But the Tainug Hasaga means that my experience of the Eibishter is qualified by my Hasaga. Which means the emes he can't have. The emes lamite, the ganze emes, the absolute truth. Because the absolute truth is not understandable, period. You don't understand it. And in Gan Eden, you're experiencing godliness based on what you understand. That's the limit. It is simply impossible for any creation, even from the higher creations. Now let's play Kabbalist for a moment. Okay, let's make trouble. Let's be troublemakers. Why? Because the teacher is away, so the students do what they want. Okay? Nivra is Bria. Correct? El Yoinim is Atzilus. The Alter Rebbe fliegt sagen auf Atzilus Oiben. Wird anschreiben Matzi, aber fliegt sagen Oiben. Whenever you see in Chassidus the word El Yoin or El Yoinim or El Yoinos, Elyon means Atzilus. And if it says Lashon Rabim Elyon, it means Atzilus and higher than Atzilus. Efshel Lashom Nivra, a Malach and a Neshama and Elam Abriya. Va'afilim El Yoinim, even Elam Atzilus. And this is a bisschen schwer to verstehen, because Elam Atzilus, Elam Achtus. Lahasi. If I'm relating to the Eibishter by understanding him, then it's not the Eibishter to whom I'm relating. A little bit, a little trace. And again, there's two parts to that itself. There's the Havdalah, the Seichel Nivdal, understanding Sichlim Nivdalim. There's a Malach and a Neshama living in no particular place and in no particular time, relating to ideas that have no reality whatsoever, which we cannot fathom. That's number one. And number two, that understanding gives them pleasure. That's what the Neshama gets when it comes in and goes back. So the Mishnah says, Gan Selam Haba, all of the pleasure that Neshama can experience in all of Elam Haba. If it would stay in Elam Haba an infinity of years, as if you can speak about time, and experience all the different pleasures that are available, it will not add up to one mitzvah. You know why? Because a mitzvah is the Eibishter himself. And it's not connected to a tfisa, to an understanding, to a bina. It's impossible for any creation. Even from the highest creations, lahasik, to reach an understanding of anything, a trace. From the light of the Eibush. Which is why we call it Ziv HaShechina, a reflection of the Shechina. That's all. The Eibush himself says the Zayar Leis Machshava Tvisa Bei Klal. You said this Friday morning or Friday afternoon before you daven mincha, yeah? And God, you said Pasach Eliyahu. Sfardim say Pasach Eliyahu every morning before davening. Yet no keli, no vessel can hold him whatsoever. To him there's one exception, but only one exception. Kasha Tfiso Mislabeshes Beteiro Mitzvah. When it is held and revealed in Teiro Mitzvahs, says Rabbi Ozai, so then then you're holy the Eibishter, and the Eibishter even revealed to you. Ba'kadosh Baruch Hu mamish the Eibishter himself. The Reisa v'kutsha berichu kulacha. Hashem and Teira. And again I'm repeating. And Hashem and mitzvahs are one. So when you come into this world and you collect tzitzis, you collect pieces of gold, and you think that potatoes are important, Gan Selam Haba cannot add up to what he's done in this life. In other words, Gan Eden is not a satisfactory or an adequate reward for life in this world. Because the Torah and Mitzvah do here is more than the whole Gan Eden. So it doesn't seem fair. Huh? You do Torah and Mitzvahs and they give you a shpai, they give you a nothing. Yeah. What's the answer? The answer is Chad, Mitzvah, Mitzvah. The only reward for being a Jew is being a Jew. My daughter went away for a Shabbos Tashliach. I mean, I have to tell you, shluchim are mind blowing. I mean, the phenomena is crazy. Yeah, and to think that there's thousands of them in the Chmavul. So she's a Crown Heights girl. She grew up here. I don't think my house is exactly a Balabatish Shtub. I would like to believe that my house is a base Chabad mitanemes, but still it's Crown Heights. Yeah, the Lech Lecha we don't have. So she spent the Shabbos by a base Chabad, and it's a very difficult shlichus that this young man has. And it's unbelievably impressive. She came home middle of the night and she wouldn't let me sleep. The hatzlacha that this person has is overwhelming. So there's the Mesiras Nefesh, Pasha the Shvedekite. It's not easy. It's very difficult. Away from everything and away from everybody, and you're raising children in this midbar. It's mavel the hatzlacha. So before she left, so she says to them, I've been in Bet Chabad, but it's just unreal. It's just, as many times I see it, it's overwhelming to see what the Rebbe gave us to give the world. I mean, this is the truth. He gave us. So he says to my daughter, and this is really, it says in the Mishnah, Schar mitzvah. The reward for shlichus is more shlichus. This was our Fabrenga last night at 1 o'clock in the morning. In other words, the reward for Mesiras Nefesh is more Mesiras Nefesh. Now, who thinks like that? Who thinks, isn't the reward for Mesiras Nefesh to sit back and relax and enjoy the show? But if you're a shliach, what are you going to give a shliach? What are you going to give a shliach? A nice house in a Lubavitcher bungalow county upstate? That's what you're going to give a shliach. What can you give a shliach? This is what he told her. And it's not like this guy has an easy life. He doesn't. He's Baruch Hashem, very successful. But this is what he told her. This is what she came home with. The reward for shliach is the reward for Mesiras Nefesh is more Mesiras Nefesh. It's unbelievable how the Rebbe has made simple people, really simple people. Ich verstehe besser für my Mercedes. But he's a shliach. Yeah. The reward, you want to give a person schar for giving to another Jew, give him opportunity to give to more Jews. It's unreal. But that's what it says here in Tanya. You want the Eibush to do a mitzvah. The delight, the pleasure, it's all secondary. It doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. It's not this. So you come to Gan Eden and you say, Eibush, I feel cheated. So what does the Eibush tell you? You mean you feel like what you're experiencing is a cheat. But you have the mitzvah itself. Whether you're experiencing the mitzvah in Gan Eden or you're not experiencing mitzvah in Gan Eden, you have the mitzvah. You took back with you a few nuggets of gold in the boxes of potatoes. And that's a Davar Nitzchi. Okay, we're going to take a break now. We're going to learn a Maimed. You want to stick around? We're going to learn another Maimed.